Hello, and welcome to Canyon Professional Development. Today, we will be discussing the art of presenting, taking your sessions to the next level. My name is Carolyn Mann, and I will be hosting your session today. I would like to start off with a quote, one that you can sort of ponder as we go through the content. It says, sharing knowledge is not about giving people something or getting something from them. That is only valid for information sharing. Sharing knowledge occurs when people are genuinely interested in helping one another develop new capacities for action. It is about creating learning processes. I thought this was super applicable to this session on the art of presenting because I've been around for a while, and people who present to others, especially those who present to teachers or educators or administrators, or anybody who is in a role where they're able to support other people, we know that we do it because we want to enrich those people's lives, and we want to support and build their knowledge so that they can then turn around and support those they work with. So for us, it's not about just sharing information or facts. It's about helping people grow and build their own capacity. During this session, we will focus on 3 objectives. We will help you determine right now, where are you? What are your current strengths as a presenter? And where are your areas for improvement? We know we all have areas for improvement. In addition, we will identify the importance of making a personal connection with your audience. That is definitely number 1. And next, we will reflect on a variety of strategies that you can use to enhance your presentations starting today. I want you to think right now, how many times have you presented to adults in the last 6 months? If you're working with somebody, I would like you to turn to them and I would like you to share this information. Now, if you're a college professor, an adjunct, maybe you teach online, maybe you teach night school, although you are working with adults and that counts, it's a different format sometimes the way we present to them. I want you to think about how many times have you presented to adults in the last 6 months in regard to professional development or sharing on a specific topic with a group of people who are interested in that topic. Maybe you're an instructional coach at a site and you are responsible for presenting to the staff once a month. So think about opportunities like that that you have had, and how many times have you presented to adults in the last 6 months? Next, I want you to think right now, if someone were to ask you, how would you describe yourself as a presenter? What words come to mind? For example, maybe you would say you're a novice. You are just starting out, and that's why you're taking this session, because you want tips and tricks to start off right out the gate as a competent presenter. Maybe you think I'm proficient. I've been around and I've done a few sessions. I'm getting better. Audience seems to enjoy my presentations. Or maybe you would say, I'm really an engaging presenter. I've noticed that when I present information, I run professional development sessions, people are really engaged. You've seen that in your feedback that you get from people, that you get very high remarks, people saying that they were engaged, that they took away different points. Maybe you're at the next level. Maybe you're exceptional and invigorating, and people walk away saying, wow, that was one of the best presentations or PD encounters I've had in a really long time. So think about, how would you describe yourself as a presenter right now? Once again, if you're working with somebody, stop the video for a second and chat with your neighbor. Share what you think, and then join me again. All right. So at this point, we should all know where we're at. And as always, as educators, as a person in any field, it's really important that we always try to take things to the next level. So today we're going to be talking about taking your presentations to the next level. Remember, however formal your presentations are, you're going to start off by looking for an anecdotal or relevant example to make it come to life. Even a short dose of some humor can break the monotony of a budget speech or a compliance training. So why not start off by telling a story? Here is a quote by Dale Carnegie. Speakers who talk about what life has taught them never fail to keep the attention of their listeners. Think about some presentations or some professional development opportunities you have had recently. How often did those presenters share personal experiences or life stories? I don't know about you, but they definitely rein me in. Oftentimes when I share stories during my PD presentations, I will see heads in the audience nodding, right? You can tell when you've made that connection. And it's really important from the beginning to let your audience know that although you may have a lot of information to share and that you have a lot of knowledge through research, you also have many similarities to them. You once were a new presenter. Tell those stories. Let them make those connections. It's very, very important. When we're telling stories, what we're doing is we're sharing main points that we want our audience to take away, but we're doing it by linking those main points to real world examples, which we all know is way more relevant than a string of facts. I wouldn't even have to do a video if I were just providing you with a string of facts. I could give you a bulleted list of all the things that you could do to become a better presenter. I don't know about you, but that wouldn't be very engaging. Nor do I feel that you would take it away and be ready to implement it, because I don't think you would be inspired. Personally, I wouldn't be inspired. So as you're thinking about preparing for your presentations, avoid sharing strings of facts. If people want strings of facts, they can go to Google, they can Google the topic, and right there, they'll have all the facts they could possibly ever want and more. We don't learn through listening to a string of facts. We learn through stories and real world examples. During your presentations, remember, try to link your main points to real world examples and human experiences. The best presenters are also those presenters who make connections with their audience. Through storytelling and building those connections, you increase your relatability. I was a classroom teacher for many years. I taught grades K through 8. When I share stories about my personal experience as a classroom teacher, that's when I see those heads nodding in my audience. Not when I share how I've been a professional development consultant and how I have worked for this company or that company. Although those things could maybe sound impressive, it's not going to make me relatable. When I share how little Johnny used to run out of my kindergarten classroom on a daily basis and how I had to chase him down and I had to have parent conference after parent conference, that's when I become relatable. That's when I tear down the barriers and people don't think of me just as an expert on the stage. And that's when their ears really open. I make that connection. In our reference section on Solutions to Go, under handouts, you will find a sheet that has references. And within those references, you will find a link to Run, Don't Walk. It is a short YouTube video by Rita Pearson. If some of you aren't familiar with her, she was an amazing educator. She passed away a while back, but she left a legacy. I suggest that you take time to go watch that video because it really displays what storytelling can do and how it can support your professional development sessions or any talks that you are giving. So when you get a chance, head over to the handouts, look at the resources, and watch this video. Here are some storytelling tips. Be sure you plan ahead. We all know that when we walk into giving a presentation, first of all, we can be a bit nervous. So it's really important that we plan ahead and we think, okay, I know that I'm going to be talking about classroom management. I know I'm working with a group of middle school educators. What stories do I have in my bag of tricks about my experience as a middle school educator that I could share and infuse within my presentation to bring the content to life? So I'm going to plan ahead. Not that I'm necessarily going to rehearse these stories, but I'm going to be ready so that I know what will be most appropriate. Now, maybe I come up with a few examples in my head, and after I meet my audience, I see how it's going. That's when I really determine which story I'm going to share. With that comes being authentic. Once again, to be authentic, I have to share both the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm not going to share all these stories about classroom management and how I was so successful. I would like to say that I was always successful, but that was not the case. I definitely struggled, just like many teachers do today. And so it's okay to share those stories as well. Be authentic. Let them know we all have the same struggles. And you're here today because I'm going to be sharing tips with you on how to be a better educator, how to be a better administrator, whoever you are speaking with. This part is sort of funny. Here you're going to tweak stories as needed. What do I mean by that? Well, we're not going to fabricate complete stories, but say, for example, I have a story that was about one of my 5th grade classrooms. That would be really applicable to the math session that I'm doing. I'm not going to change what happened in the story necessarily, but maybe I'm working with a 6th grade audience who is at the middle school. And I know that middle school teachers often really feel like they're in a different bubble than elementary school teachers. My tweak might be that I say I was working with upper elementary, which sometimes can include 6th grade. Whatever you need to do just to make sure that they understand that the story is applicable to them. Also, you're going to want to know when to smile, right? It is so powerful. A smile goes a very long way. How about those gasps? I was devastated when that parent came in and told me I had hurt little Johnny's feelings, right? They can feel your emotion. And when to pause. When we're still telling stories, it's really important that we use that pause. We use that pause time to let what we've said just sink in. So when is that most appropriate? Right now, I want you to consider, what are your takeaways already in regard to storytelling? Is storytelling currently one of your strengths, or is it possibly an area for growth? You think maybe you could be a little bit more intentional with planning ahead in regard to what stories you might be sharing when you're presenting for an audience. That takes us to the next piece, showing your passion. Here we have a quote. It says, "It's much easier to be convincing if you care about your topic. Figure out what's important to you about your message and speak from the heart." Well, first and foremost, if we're going to be presenting on a topic, hopefully you've had an option and you have chosen to present on this topic because it is something that means something to you. Sometimes that's not the case. Maybe we're doing a talk about compliance and it's not the most exciting talk, but yet we can think about examples for us where following these compliance pieces have made a difference in our lives, and perhaps the difference of the students that you work with or the teachers that you support or the clients that you work with. So sometimes we have to dig a little deeper to find our passion, but we can. How can we show our passion? Well, first of all, we want to start strong. So we already discussed one way to start strong is to start with that story. However, there are some other things that we can do as well. Once again, we can leverage the benefits of humor. I'm going to do a talk on compliance, and it can be as simple as saying something like, "Hi, friends, I'm so happy you're here. I know you probably lost sleep getting excited about learning a little bit about compliance and the documentation we're going to be taking. And I'm just as excited as you are." You're going to get some giggles. But think, how can you leverage humor to acknowledge that we're all here, we're all on the same playing field, and we're all looking for the same outcome. I love rhetorical questions. Get your audience thinking right from the beginning. Perhaps a quote. So in this particular presentation, you've noticed that I've integrated several quotes, and I'm going to integrate more as we go through. That's because people can really relate to quotes. It can help them really see the purpose in the content that you're sharing. So consider using quotes as well. And last but not least, a story to add context. So perhaps I'm doing something on compliance and I have a personal story about where I thought, oh, it's no big deal. Why does my administration make such a big deal about us following X or Y procedure? And then I share a story where, wow, had I not done that, something very negative could have happened, or a student could have really been impacted. So think about how you can add context utilizing a story. So we know we're going to use stories. We're going to show our passion. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to consider our voice inflection. And what are you really trying to say? I'm going to have you do a little activity for me. I want you to try speaking the sentence below, giving it a variety of different meanings by changing your voice inflection. I'd like you to stop the video for a minute, and I'd like you to try speaking the sentence below in a variety of different ways. When you're ready, go ahead and click play, and we will continue. Okay, friends, I hope you had fun with that. So I see the sentence in front of me, and maybe you came up with some of these. I know the answer versus, I know the answer versus, I know the answer. The way I shared that sentence gave 3 very different messages, from I really don't know the answer to I'm very excited about knowing the answer to why do you think I know the answer, right? So our voice inflection can really make a difference. And as we're presenting, we need to realize the impact that our voice inflection has on our audience. I'm a very excitable person, and so I tend to really utilize voice inflection, and my voice gets a little higher. I hang on to my words a little bit longer when I'm really excited about things, and my audience feels that. What are some of the characteristics of your voice inflection that you notice? I have worked with people who they're a bit more thoughtful, a bit more articulate than I am, and they seem to hang on to their words a little bit more. Their pauses or their ups and downs in their inflection are more drastic. How do these things affect your audience? Well, I know that if I talk in a very monotone voice, it doesn't matter what I'm saying because I'm going to bore everybody, right? So we have to be very conscious of what we're doing. That also means that we have to be really comfortable with the content that we're sharing, because if we're not comfortable with the content, sometimes that can change our voice inflection without us wanting it to be changed. So some things to consider. In the resources, you will also find the link to another video that talks about voice inflection. It is a YouTube video. I provided the link in handouts under resources. Take a look at that video. The speaker shares some great tips about how you can become more cognizant of the way you're speaking, and you can even practice. So take a look at that. As we continue on, maybe listen to my voice inflection when you're talking to your neighbor. How are you sounding? So just something else to take away. The next piece I've already touched on. It is imperative that you get to know your audience, because in order to tell stories, in order to show your passion, in order to know when to use that voice inflection to show your excitement, you need to know your audience. Here's a quote by C. Kent Wright. To sway an audience, you must watch them as you speak. So definitely, we need to be watching our audience as we speak. I don't know if you have ever sat through a presentation and thought to yourself, this person really needs to survey the audience because it's not going so well, right? And the person is just oblivious. They continue on, and they're not noticing that half of the audience is falling asleep. So yes, during your presentations, it's extremely important that you keep an eye on your audience and gauge how engaged they are. But it's also important to do some research beforehand to determine if there's a common audience type. This will help you tailor your message. So as a professional development provider, we cater to teachers, administrators, superintendents, paraprofessionals. Knowing my audience is going to make a huge difference when I'm working with paraprofessionals or instructional assistants versus when I'm working with superintendents. First of all, the information that I'm sharing is probably going to be quite different, but also the connections that I make. If I'm working with instructional assistants or paraprofessionals, I'm going to share stories that have to do with when I was in the classroom, or maybe when I worked as a paraprofessional myself, or my engagement with paraprofessionals throughout my career. Where if I'm working with superintendents, my stories are going to be much different. I might share more about my time working at the district office level, etc. You want to think about what perspective you're going to take. So here are some tips for getting to know your audience. First of all, do your research. What is important to them? What is their familiarity with the topic? How often does this happen? How often do you go into a meeting and you begin to talk about something and you soon realize they have no idea what I'm talking about? Perhaps their supervisor or their principal said, this is what I would like my staff to learn about. It's a passion of perhaps that administrator or that boss, but yet their employees really know nothing about it. So we want to make sure we know how familiar they are with the topic. Reach out to the person who's planning the session, who has hired you or reached out to you to facilitate the session. Do some research online. We're so lucky. We have tons of information at our fingertips. Find out everything you can. When I work with school districts, I'll go on their district website and I will look at all the information, all of their initiatives that I can find information about. I will go to teachers' websites if I have access to those. So do your research. What is their history with you and your organization? So perhaps you are going in to a place where in the past, the person in your role was not a hit, right? Perhaps all the sessions, all the presentations that they led, people found to be a bit boring or not applicable to them. You need to know that ahead of time so that when you walk in the door, you change that climate, you change their beliefs about what they're going to get out of your session. If you've already been working with them and you have a great relationship, then the opposite is true. Build on that. Talk about last time we were together, we had so many great takeaways and refresh their memory about how much they really enjoyed your time together. Last but not least, this one is so very important. Think about what questions are they likely to ask, okay? As a presenter, we can't be prepared for every question and nobody expects us to. It is perfectly acceptable to say, you know what, that is a really great question. And I want to give you the very best answer. So I'm going to research that, talk to the right people, and get in touch with you. That's okay. However, for the most part, we can use our imaginations to predict some of the questions that our audience is likely to ask. Why would we want to do that? We want to do that because we want to make sure that we're prepared. So if I'm working with an audience full of paraprofessionals and I think that they're going to ask about their next steps, they're wanting to become a full-fledged teacher, and maybe they're going to ask, what's my next step? What do I do? Maybe I have some college information prepared. Maybe I have some programs that their district supports available. Maybe I'm working with some superintendents and they want to know next steps for implementing a certain initiative in their district. Maybe I have some of that information ready. We often get the questions, well, you are telling me this, but I don't feel like I have the support within my district or within my organization. If I know that that might happen, I will take the time prior to talk to those leaders in charge to say, hey, if people come to me with this, how would you like me to answer this? Do your research. It is really going to pay off. And as we already mentioned, body language and eye contact. Are people making eye contact with you? We know that that is a natural thing that people do when they're engaged. Sometimes people do it just because they're polite, but for the most part, it's a pretty good indicator. And then body language, body language, body language. It is so important to pay attention to your audience's body language to know, are we putting them to sleep or are they engaged? So think about your takeaways there. Are you doing your research, or is that something you need to be more diligent about? Our next point, focus your presentation. If you don't know what you want to achieve in your presentation, your audience never will. Think about some sessions that you have been to recently. Has your facilitator been very clear about their purpose? Have you walked away knowing this is what I'm taking away from this presentation? Although the presenter might share stories, answer questions, ultimately they're going to come back to the main focus of the presentation. As you're creating your presentations or practicing your facilitation, put your presentation to the test. It's called the why, who cares, so what test. As you're looking at your slides, as you're thinking about your stories, ask yourself, why am I sharing this? Who cares about this? Will my audience care about this? Or so what? This really doesn't matter. If you answer those questions in that way, saying, no, really doesn't matter, I don't think they'll care, I'm not sure why I'm doing this, then absolutely cut it from your presentation. If it doesn't align with your objective, cut it. Because we know that if we go off on too many tangents, we're going to lose our audience. We're not going to stay focused, and they're not going to stay focused. So it's extremely important that we're cognizant of this. Staying focused means that we don't veer too far from our identified path. If I'm speaking to a group about classroom management, I am going to head down that straight path where all of my examples, my stories, are going to focus on classroom management. If instead I were to veer off the path and start talking a little bit about math and letting people go into conversations about how they're not being supported by their administration and then back over to classroom management, I've really lost focus. And worse than me losing focus is the fact that my participants aren't going to walk away with the knowledge that I was hoping for. So stay focused. We have a couple more. We're going to keep it simple. So simplify the complex ideas, then the simplest ideas with accessible language. What do I mean by this? Most presenters are pretty concerned about displaying their knowledge rather than focusing on the fact that your listeners are not always able to make heads or tails of your words. Sometimes we feel like we need to utilize a specific vocabulary that aligns with the profession, that makes us seem extra intelligent. Well, yes, it is great that we have that knowledge and we're able to speak like that, but we know that often we lose our audience when we do that. We need to keep things simple. And here's a great example as to why. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Steve Jobs. He was known as an excellent speaker, often giving keynote speeches for Apple. People applauded the way he was able to engage an audience. His slides were often visual heavy, not a lot of words. We know that that's best practice. But in regards to his actual presentation, the average words per sentence he used was 10.5. That's a fairly short sentence. The amount of difficult words he utilized in his presentations were only about 2.9%. And last but not least, the level of the spoken language that he utilized during his presentations was the equivalent of a 5th grade level. I don't know about you, but I know Steve Jobs was a very intelligent man. I highly doubt that his ability level was that of a 5th grader. However, he was an excellent presenter, and he knew that he had to keep it simple in order to keep his audience engaged. Unlike Steve Jobs, Mr. Bill Gates does not always understand that. His average words per sentence is 21.6. That's almost double or over double Steve Jobs. Long sentences, difficult words, 5.11%. And the level of his spoken language, 10th grade, 7th month. So much more difficult. And if you were to ask somebody who had seen both of these men speak, they would almost all clearly state that Jobs was very engaging and Bill Gates was more boring. Simply put, right? I was trying to think of a different way to say that, but boring. And that's because it's hard to stay engaged when somebody is giving you word soup and they're utilizing all of these words in their sentences and then infusing in difficult words that you don't understand. And this is a prime example as to why we need to keep it simple. Some tips for keeping it simple. We're going to avoid jargon. So for example, if I'm working with a group of instructional assistants, I might want to talk to them about ways to keep track of their students' progress. I could use the word anecdotal records, which, yes, as a seasoned educator and many years into the profession, I know what that is. However, I should not expect that everybody else does, right? So why can't I just say, take notes? If I then want to share that sometimes that's called anecdotal notes or anecdotal records, that's fine, but I want to keep it simple. I like to put it this way: don't dress up your vocabulary. Use words that people know. One more tip in regard to jargon and vocabulary is acronyms. At Canyon Professional Development, we work with people all over the United States, even in different countries. And in education, people don't all use the same acronyms. And so it can be very confusing when you're throwing those into your presentations and people are saying, what is ELA? What is ESL? So you want to be very careful about doing that. The last thing is that you want to speak clearly and slowly. I'm a very excited person and very passionate about what I share. And sometimes I can speed it up. I've had to practice slowing down my speech. And if you're one of those people who tend to speak fast, you need to work on that as well. However, there is a caveat. We don't want to slow it down too much because then we're going to put our audience to sleep. So remember, keep it simple. Don't dress up that vocabulary. Let's get to the physical part of it, working on your stage presence. This quote by Deborah Bull is so telling. Body language is a very powerful tool. We had body language before we had speech. And apparently 80%, my friends, of what you understand in a conversation is read through the body, not the words. Isn't that interesting? So without even knowing we're doing it, we are sending a message. This is in our day-to-day communication with our friends, our family, but this is huge when we're on stage or we're presenting because all eyes are on us. So I want you to consider right now doing a body audit. What are you doing with your body right now? Sometimes we're not even aware. So let's talk about some positions. We have the woman in the red sweatshirt. She has her hands on her hips. We call that a power position, right? Like the Superman position. We know that that is a power position. When somebody stands like that, it is showing that they feel confident. If we look at the gentleman in the center, maybe you're sitting like that right now, hands behind your head. Normally when somebody's sitting like this, they have their hands behind their head. Maybe their legs aren't close together. They're taking up a lot of space. The more space you're occupying with your body, whether you're sitting or standing, the more confident you appear and are perceived. And normally, the more confident you're feeling. The man on the right, he has his hands together. His legs are slightly spread, so he's sort of right in the middle. If you're sitting in your chair and you're sort of shriveled up, shoulders down, that is a position that shows that you are not feeling maybe quite as confident. Think about those times in your life when you've been put into different predicaments and how your body reacts. Our body shapes who we are. It's so important to remember our nonverbals influence how others think and feel about us. So I've done this test. Stand up in front of an audience and put your hands in your pocket. Start talking. Hold your hands really close to you, or maybe even put them behind your back, and don't move. Within a very short time, if you polled your audience, they would share that it almost made them feel uncomfortable, right? Because our subconscious says, I can't trust them. I can't see their hands. Are they confident? Are they hiding something, right? The opposite of that is true. When I come out on the stage, I'm sharing my story. I've got my hands in the air. I'm making different hand gestures. I may be doing that Superman pose. From the beginning, my audience starts to believe me. They see my credibility and they see my confidence. Some of you might be thinking, but Carolyn, I am nervous. I don't feel confident. But you know what? That's okay, because we can change that. This is very interesting. Did you know that your nonverbals don't only influence what others think of you, but they also influence how you think and feel about yourself? So I challenge you, next time you get in front of a group to speak, or you go out on a stage to give a presentation, choose a power position to start. What happens is it sends a message to our brain telling us, you've got this, versus walking out maybe a little shriveled up, hunched over a bit. That is only going to add to our anxious feeling. So I challenge you, figure out what that power pose is and walk out on stage or in front of your audience, ready to go. I like to call that faking it until you make it, right? Going out there, showing confidence, letting others know that you have something important to share with them. If you'd like to see a great example of how to do this, in the resources, I've also linked this TED Talk. This is a great TED Talk by this gentleman who goes over some tips about how our body language and how the inflections in our voice can allow us to fake it till we make it, right? Until we are actually feeling more confident, building our own confidence, and starting off our presentations by making our audience feel confident in what we have to share. Considering all of these points, you might be asking, why are we spending so much time discussing these presentation strategies? Isn't it important that I know the content? Isn't that the most important thing? I want you to pause the video and I want you to take a couple of minutes, share your thoughts with your neighbor. We're not synchronous, so we can't put them in the chat. So share your thoughts with your neighbor. Maybe write your thoughts down in a journal if you're not currently sitting with somebody. After you've done that, start the video again and we'll wrap this up. So I'm sure people came up with a variety of different reasons as to why we're spending all this time talking about presentation style. Here it is, friends. It is not rocket science. We know based on survey feedbacks within our organization, within other organizations, we know based on research and ongoing communication with others in the industry that there is a direct connection between presentation style and audience satisfaction. When people walk away from a presentation and they say, wow, I feel inspired. One common comment or piece of feedback that we get is that, wow, that presenter's energy and passion made me excited. We get, there were so many things that the presenter shared that I'm just going to take away because they seem amazing. We very rarely hear people say, that must be a real expert in the area of classroom management. Or, wow, that person must have done a lot of research because I really loved the references that they gave at the bottom of their slides. Yes, you have to know your content. You have to be a content expert per se. But in addition to that, your presentation style is what is really going to take your presentations to the next level and have your audiences walking away saying, that was a game changer. I'd like you to consider, out of all the things we talked about, what are the 1 or 2 things you're going to take away and implement tomorrow or begin thinking about so that when you give your next presentation or your next speech, you are going to come out of the gate ready to go. We talked about what your strengths were at the beginning and your areas for improvement as a presenter. I hope as we went through this presentation, you were able to identify at least one thing that you can do to improve your presentations. I hope you're understanding the importance of making that personal connection with your audience. And last but not least, I hope you have identified at least 1 to 2 strategies, 1 to 2, that you can use to enhance your presentations. I thank you for spending time with me, and I just wanted to share our why here at Canyon Professional Development. We are here to empower, educate, and inspire our community, you, so that you can take action to fulfill your purpose and serve others. As always, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find lots of free videos and resources to help you in a variety of different areas. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in another course. Have a great day.